When I think of confident role models, I tend to think of people in my own life that I just view as like, hey, this person seems to perform well in a bunch of different situations. Like in my book, there's a guy I mentioned briefly, RJ, and I always think of him as a really confident role model because he seems to do really well in a lot of different situations. And so I would tell people like look to your own life and people that seem to exhibit the um, sort of that confidence in everyday situations because I feel like that's a lot more attainable, a lot more helpful.
Confidence, we were speaking before, is kind of split down the middle. There is real confidence, and then there's, I would call it show confidence. But so, say someone is trying to find a role model in their own life, would you say it would be something more towards the class clown kind of character or like the sales guy kind of character?
I view it almost as different tools for different situations, right? You're not going to use a hammer when you need to use a screwdriver. Otherwise, you're going to have even more repairs to do, right? And so, in some situations where humor might be called on to sort of add in some levity or make a tense situation a little less tense, whatever it happens to be, that class clown model probably really good to go with. Uh, the seal model where someone is really sort of stoic and really kind of dialed in. I think of someone like Jocko Willink or maybe David Goggins, someone like that. Uh, that might be a really good model for like if you need to take very quick action and you need to uh, sort of exhibit those leadership qualities to get people to sort of fall in line and follow your lead if you know a good path forward for a group or anything like that.
Where would someone like a conversationalist like Joe Rogan fall in there? Where would you maybe look at him? If what would you need to be lacking?
You bring up a really good point, which is people that are confident. It There's a lot of stuff that folds into the term confidence. In my opinion, the word confidence is what I call a zipped term. What that means is that it's really a collection of a bunch of micro skills inside that larger skill of confidence. And so when we use a term like confidence, that's an umbrella term. That's a zip term. Now, someone like Rogan, when you think of him, or you think of Jocko, you think of Goggins, someone like that. If you really tried to boil it down on a very granular level, you probably arrive at something like they have a worldview and they have a lot of faith in their own ability, but they're not so tied to that worldview that they're willing to dismiss things, right? They're what is that phrase? Convictions strong convictions loosely held, where they're open to being wrong and they're open to having new information presented to them, but they are pretty confident in how they view the world. So when you look at how they communicate when they're at least, on podcasts and stuff like that, they have a very specific worldview and they're not afraid to voice those opinions.
Yeah. We'll get back to strong opinions later on because there's a certain segment I want to target with it. But there's, whenever I think of pure confidence, someone that I would draw from experience and look at for the social confidence more than anything, because that's what we're going to talk about today. There's one thing that definitely does come up first, and I would imagine anybody listening or searching this topic is going to be one of the first things too, and that's eye contact. Why are we so sheepish of eye contact when it is just as simple as looking at another person?
What I think about when I think about eye contact is it's a crucial skill that people maybe tend to over index a little bit. What I mean by that is once you get up to a minimum viable level of eye contact where you're able to look at another person until one of you looks away, and then because when you think about a conversation, how does it normally go? Like you make a little eye contact, somebody breaks eye contact, and then you both look at the person passing by or the car or whatever it is, and then you re-engage, right? But there can be a real disconnect between feeling you feel really vulnerable when you're making eye contact because you see the other person sees you, and especially when you're talking. Like when you're talking and making eye contact, that's actually the hardest version of eye contact to do. Um, Now, what I mean by over indexing is past a certain point, I I never get into the whole like you need to make eye contact for 52 seconds and then like it's the same kind of thing with handshakes. Like your hand needs to be on top at a 45-degree angle and then you need to grab their bicep. It's like no. It's very easy, especially with body language. Like yes, body language is important up to a certain point, but if you start to over index on a lot of this stuff, then you start to go down a rabbit hole of overthinking every component of body language and trying to do everything perfectly. And guess what? You are so far inside your head trying to manage the situation that what hope do you have of listening and actually connecting with that person? Like that graph goes down really quick and then your interactions tend to suffer for it. So get good at just a little bit of eye contact, breaking eye contact, coming back, making eye contact when you speak, and then from there, great, you said it, then you can forget it.
Found a hilarious Reddit thread today about this because I wanted to know where the complications like contact, like because like you said, it's overthought really bad. Like it is just looking at another person. But there was some guy that I think he might be some sort of communications expert, but he was getting a little bit pissed off at seeing all the questions and they're not being answered properly. So he ran an experiment while he was at a concert, and the amount of people talking to them, whoever it was that was next to them, and not looking at their eyes was like something. I think he said it was something like 80 something percent of the entire concert, and it wasn't a big concert, but it's enough of a sample size to see it. But then he wrote underneath it that if any of you could get filmed where you are actually looking when you're speaking to someone or listening to someone, you would fix your eye contact issue straight away. There are people looking at feet, elbows, hands, Adam's apples. Like he put on some screenshots of some people that were there, and there was one guy that just looking at another guy's shoulder when he was talking to him and having a big discussion. And it's almost like it. I know, understand it's overthought, things like that, but are we maybe overblowing it because we think it's more intimate than it is? Like, I know if I'm speaking to someone, they're not looking at my face or my eyes, I don't assume they're listening either way. But again, I would know also on the other side, if someone is looking at me while I was talking, I would maybe get a little bit flustered and think, what are they doing here now? Why are they making this so tense?
Yeah, so I think what's in the middle of those two extremes is quote unquote the right amount of eye contact. The right amount of eye contact isn't boring into someone's soul, right? It's not just like prolonged eye contact because then that sort of whether intentionally or unintentionally, that kind of triggers a response of like, oh, yeah, I'm taking it to an extreme, but does this person want to fight me? Right? And it's like, no, 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 no. They're just making a lot of eye contact. In the middle is probably something like count to three, 1, 2, 3. And then you just casually break on eye contact. Maybe they break eye contact first and they look away. Then you kind of look in the direction that they're looking. And then you'll probably see that they re-engage you. And then you swing back and then you 1, 2, 3 again. And I think that gives you the right balance between you don't want to like psycho it where you're just like boring into them, but you don't want to be completely checked out. And the reason why is because, well, you nailed it when you said, I don't feel like they even want to be here because we want to be conscious of the signals that we're sending to other people. If we're sending the signal of like, hey, I'm excited to be here, I'm excited to talk to you. That's usually the right signal to send because it's going to encourage the other person to share more and be engaged because they're seeing that you're engaged. Someone's really checked out or someone that's too focused. Those are two extremes that are not going to be helpful and going to lead you down a less than helpful path.
We brushed across body language, and I done it purposely because I wanted to bring it back because I kept seeing this question under what's his name? I can't remember his name. He's like some kind of like dating expert, but he was on Modern Wisdom, and he was talking about how he gets so many questions by people asking, how do you develop a natural body language? And he laughed at it like what is your actual body language? And the people he got replied to, they would it was so bad. It was like my feet are pointed at 37-degree angles and shit like this. And he had just put out a statement or something like if you're going to mess me about body language, at least understand that you're overthinking it to the extreme. And it was something that I got a lot when I put it out in my newsletter that you were coming on about body language. And that's something like, it's maybe a bit like eye contact, but it's more extreme because it's more noticeable. But do you think that the problem we have with body language is not that we're overthinking it, is that we're overdoing it?
I think it's possible to overdo anything. And I think that overdoing it stems probably from overthinking it. If you take someone who wants to have better communication skills, wants to be more socially confident, well, what's the first most logical thing that they're going to think about? They're going to think about, hey, I want to I want to control what I can control. And so body language would certainly fit into that bucket where it's like, well, okay, I can control my body, or at least I can probably learn to control my body. And so I think what ends up happening is they over index on that so hard because they want to try to, I'll go, I'll even go this far. I think that they perhaps can't read minds, but I think that perhaps they concoct a world where they think, hey, if only I had perfect body language, then every interaction I have will be perfect. I'm here to tell you that's flat out wrong. Uh, that will never work because it takes you and the other person sort of meeting each other 50-50 to have a good conversation. Like you can't control that other person's life. You can't control the kind of week they've had or the kind of day that they've had. If you over index on your body language, like, oh, my feet are at 37 degrees and blah, blah, blah. You've successfully like hermit crabbed yourself into your head and you're going to have a very bad time. Now, with that being said, much like eye contact, look like your general body position. I will give you two rules of thumb. One is early in a conversation and one is later in a conversation. Early in a conversation, say you're just starting a conversation at a meetup or a group or after a fitness class or whatever, your body position and your tone of voice and your eye contact should be very, I'll call it lightweight. What I mean by that is I'm fine. Like it's the mindset of I'm fine with this conversation ending at any time. Where maybe your body's like slightly pointed away when you first start a conversation because you want to decrease the intensity of you with that other person. And then you start talking a little bit about the class. You're like, oh yeah, I thought I was going to pass out in this one spot. And then they mention something and maybe you kind of swing and you kind of square off a little bit more because you want to give them signals that like, hey, I'm enjoying this conversation. So that gets you into the later part of the conversation where, yeah, you're probably going to be more engaged and more, squared off from a shoulder perspective. You're going to be giving the signals that say, hey, I'm happy to be talking to you. And so beyond those two things, I would tell you there's so much more important stuff to focus on in a conversation than body language. So you nail the eye contact from that perspective, you nail the body language from that perspective. That covers 85% or maybe even more of a percentage of everything that you need to know, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm going to target the other percentage remaining because this is something that I think people go wrong from the start. And I think this is step one, but for some reason people can't understand it, which is the mindset of it. Like the mindset between someone who's socially confident and someone who's socially unconfident. And I want to kind of delve in here. Where is the differences we're missing here? Because I can imagine they're not as far away from what people think. Imagine these are fine lines. These are simple mannerisms. Is it maybe just that they're not overthinking it? They're just going in and hoping for it, whatever happens next.
If you take someone who feels socially incompetent versus someone who feels really socially confident, the difference, in my opinion, the people I work with are overthinkers who want to improve their social confidence. And so oftentimes, I would say about 100% of the time, uh, they are running a movie in their head of, "Hey, I am socially incompetent," and they're showing themselves constant proof of that social incompetence. I told a joke that didn't land, or this awkward moment happened, or that awkward moment happened. And think about it, like any skill that you've ever built. Imagine if you thought about, like, say you're playing guitar and you thought about every time you hit a bad note before you started practicing. My goodness, how would you ever feel confident? You would never feel confident. So, what I talk about in the book and what I'll tell you now is that the key is like step one is show yourself frequent proof of your own competence. And a lot of people have more confidence than they might expect because we have a tendency to throw away uh, situations or positive examples just because 1% went wrong or 5% went wrong. So show your mind frequent proof of your own competence, and over time, you will start to believe the proof.
Yeah, this is a nice little bubble we're on now, because now we're separating that self confidence from social confidence, which is the big thing people draw across the wrong way. Because I saw a lot of, especially now when the confidence is a big thing, now people want to develop confidence, and because people have so much more anxiety, they're not social anymore. But this is the big thing of, like, I saw a lot of people that were on these like threads that were saying like, I'm not confident because I'm not good at anything, or I'm not quite skilled at anything yet. And I thought about it like many times I've been in conversation with people, the only time I'm actually really that bothered about how good they are at something is when I'm here. Like in my normal day-to-day life, I'm not picking who I speak to based on how skilled they are at playing the guitar or the drums. I don't really care too much. So is it maybe that we're putting too much pressure on judgment? Is that where the problem is stemming from?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, which is at its core, there's a fear of what other people think of you in varying degrees, right? Someone who is really um, really sensitive to that. They're walking around and they're trying not to ruffle any feathers because they're like, oh, what if I upset this person, or does this person like me, or and they end up second guessing basically everything they do socially. As you might imagine, not helpful. Not helpful in the least. Uh, there's there's something I like called the movie poster reframe, and what it is imagine if you're outside of a movie theater and you're walking past different posters, and each poster is someone's life. The first one you walk past is your movie poster, and guess what? You're the biggest head on that movie poster. If you have a spouse, husband, wife, they're probably the second biggest head, and then you've got your friends or your kids, and probably some names at the bottom of people that you know. Okay, that's yours. You walk a little further. You walk past your spouse's movie poster. Guess what? You're not the top. You're not the biggest head on that movie poster. You're now relegated to the second biggest head, and then you keep going down. Maybe you venture past your friends. Well, you're one of the heads at the bottom. Maybe you venture past your coworkers. You might not be on their movie poster at all. Maybe you're and the last line and the little names at the bottom, but probably not even then. And you think of everyone on earth that even knows you exist. Guess what? I hate to break it to you. You're not on their movie poster. And that's okay because not everyone's on your movie poster either. And so when you're, I think, bringing it back to the question, if you're concerned with what other people think of you, it's important to consider that uh, you might be feeling that way because you're scared of losing something that you never had in the first place, which is appearing on that person's movie poster. When my view of things like this is that the unhelpful frame is, hey, this person's on a pedestal above me somehow. The more helpful frame is we're all just people. If we're all just people, then I am free to talk to anyone on planet Earth because we are all just people. In 200 years, we'll all be dead. So, so uh, there's nothing mentally that stops me after I have this mindset installed from reaching out to anyone or starting a conversation because I never had anything to begin with. So I'm not scared of losing anything because there's nothing to lose. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, because this is where I was thinking of, because I imagine whenever I brought you on, I was researching what you do. I'd imagine most of your job is almost breaking people's beliefs that are limiting what they do. And there's one that I thought of because I had to do it when I was a little bit younger. I was a teenager, and this was a real tough one for me to shift. But how often are you getting people to reframe their phrases and their natural tone from negative to positive?
So you're right when you say like the very first thing I do with every client is you could call it mindset. I think about it like your mental operating system, where you need a patch. You need a new version installed because the version you have isn't helpful. And you know, you know, I really I feel like it's not quite their fault because they've spent their entire life with a certain mindset. Who knows how that faulty operating system got installed? But the reality is, if you want to be more successful in your life, you have to adopt new beliefs and new mindsets to improve yourself and get to what you ultimately want, which might be, having more friends, better career, starting a business, whatever happens to be, right? And so a lot of it is breaking those old beliefs. And one thing that it's one of the first things I help people with, which is something I call choose your own reality, where there are some social situations that are clearly positive. Hey, you did a great job on that presentation. Or, oh man, I'm having so much fun talking to you. There are some situations that are clearly negative. Oh, you really messed up on that presentation. Or, oh, please get away from me. Which, admittedly, those don't happen very often, right? But a lot of social situations kind of fit in this ambiguous middle, like this ambiguous middle 80%, or so. Um, and so part of the operating system upgrade is, if I'm explaining things to myself in a negative way, the classic example is pretty much perfect. Is you text someone and they don't text back. You have no other information other than they didn't respond to you, and so it would be very easy for you mentally to say to yourself, "Oh, did I say something? Did they take offense to something? Are they upset with me?" You don't have any inputs other than you just know that they didn't respond. And so you start explaining the world or that situation in a negative way. It's not helpful, because the reality is, since you can't read that person's mind, you don't know the whole story of what's going on with them. And so you've created a fictional reality and you're buying into that fictional negative reality. You could explain that in a different way. You could say, oh, well, they're probably just busy. They'll get back to me when they can. Now, both the positive and the negative, they're both fictional stories. They're both probably inaccurate. But if I had my pick, why wouldn't I pick the more neutral or even slightly positive version of that story? That's going to be a more helpful story, because that's going to impact the rest of my day or the rest of my week, my interactions with that person when they do come back around or I reach out again. That's a much more helpful story to buy into, rather than that negative framing of, oh, it's about me, my ego is involved, things are bad. No, it's not helpful at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there's always I can't remember who said it, but I think I might have someone actually said it on here, but they were saying that, how often do you actually want to stay in a conversation with someone that complains all the time? And whenever you think about it, it's true, because that's the natural thing people do. You go and meet someone and say, oh, how was work this week? Oh, it was this, it was that. Or else you just go, oh, coffee was okay. Just something like that would make it so much better. Probably going into another conversation with something else anyway. But I think that is one of the biggest things, especially from what, like, I haven't really looked too deep into it since I was probably a teenager, but since doing the research for this, my God, some people talk about themselves as crazy. And the one thing that you mentioned hermits earlier, and it's been in my head, where I found out about this thing called HermitMaxxing. Have you heard this?
No, but I think I can guess. Explain it to me.
This is people that have pretty much banished themselves from trying to be socially confident anymore, because they've been socially awkward their whole lives. And they're now just, I actually think there was a group of them that don't come outside anymore. And I just think that this is the route we're going down. Jesus, my God, this is going to get scary.
There's a version of this in Japan, hikikomori, maybe, where basically, for all intents and purposes, they brick themselves into their apartment or whatever, and they play games or whatever happens to be. And on a zooming out on a civilizational scale, it's like we need people to be social and interact with people, because it's good for just the continuation of the human race, which is probably a good thing. And so, and at the same time, I can understand why someone might, if they've had repeated negative experiences and they don't, I think this is the key part, is they don't have, presumably, any hope of change. And so they think, why bother? And that to me is, it's a sad thing, because imagine your world without hope. Like, man, that's rough. Like, I need hope to uh, keep me going and keep me hopeful about the future. And so, I'm sure one or two of them will probably pick up my book and change things, and that's great. My hope is to catch people before they even find out what hermit maxing is, right? And they change their timeline, so that they can have a better experience in life.
This is a phrase I hear a lot, and maybe I don't know. Maybe it's just because I went from zero social to being okay socially that I missed this area. But how do you teach people to sit in awkward silences and not socially self-destruct?
Mm. Yeah, how I think about it is if you've committed to, hey, I want to improve my people skills, I want to improve my social skills. Um, I'm what follows from that is I'm going to have more conversations. What follows from that is my number of awkward moments is going to increase. Maybe not my percentage because my skills will increase, so the percentage actually might go down. Uh, but the raw number is going to increase, and so part of it is expecting, like, hey, every once in a while awkward moments will happen. And you could even go as far as to say there are no awkward moments, but thinking makes them so, right? Like I'm not Shakespeare, but how we interpret those events, that's, in my opinion, what makes it awkward or non-awkward. I think part of the problem is that when most people think of an awkward moment in the past, they just kind of run the old VHS tape back and they rewind and it goes over and over and over. And once they get to that point of peak awkwardness, they shut it off because it's too uncomfortable. They don't want to be around that memory. And so they're just like, oh God, get this away from me. They don't go the extra step and say, hey, well, what would this be like if I maybe imagined someone else doing this thing or even imagine myself in third person doing this thing, got a little emotional distance from it. And, is there anything about this that I would fix? Maybe, maybe not. Either answer is okay. It's not until people process that stuff that they realize that, like, oh, okay, that awkward moment, sure, it happened. It's not that big a deal because it won't matter in 10 months and it won't matter in 10 years. I won't be able to remember it. I think what is interesting, because I'll go through this work with clients and I'll ask them, hey, when was the last time you remember someone else doing something really awkward? And can you describe it to me in detail? And they basically can't. I maybe have had 1 out of 100 people that are able to describe something, and I asked them, like, "Well, how did you view that person in that moment?" And they just were like, I just felt a lot of empathy because I would have pulled on that door too. It wasn't clear that it was a push or a pull, like, we tend to give other people the benefit of the doubt that we are reluctant to give ourselves, and that's a problem if you're trying to improve yourself. You need to be a friend to yourself just like you'd be a friend to someone else.
I feel like this area is provoked a lot because this is something that blows my mind a little bit because people seem to struggle with small talk. Yet, most of the time they're pretty good in deep talk, which I don't understand because deep talk's a lot harder than small talk. So, why do we overthink small talk? Should small talk just not be like an introduction anyway? It's nothing too crazy, is it?
How I think about it is it's much more like a pool where you're going from the shallow end to the deep end, and there's not, there's that like middle section where it's getting a little deeper, but your head's not submerged, right? It's all conversation, and so I think framing it all as conversation. I need the smaller talk just to warm the other person up, so that I can get to deeper topics. And so I think part of it is overthinking, and when you think of the same kind of fear of, hey, I want this person, on some level it's I want this person to like me, you know uh I don't want to be awkward, and so they're sort of gripping too tight, uh and that leads you down, um stressing about what to talk about, and you're like, oh, I need like the perfect thing. I need to keep like 17 topics in my back pocket, and it's like, well, it's probably not helpful. What's more helpful is saying to yourself, well, the topic that I need to pivot to, it's probably already in the current conversation. Like if someone's talking about mountain biking, well, maybe you're not into mountain biking at all, but you like to hike. And so you're like, well, have you ever hiked? There's this good trail over by the mountain or whatever. You've got so many topics that you could pivot to. Most people try to grip too hard, and I think that's what can cause a lot of the small talk problems, where they're like, "Oh, I need to think of the perfect thing to say," and it's like, you need to let go of the perfect thing to say, because the perfect thing doesn't exist. To engineer the perfect thing to say, you would have to know everything about that other person's life up to the current moment, and you don't, and that's okay.
Yeah. Like small talk gets asked so much on this show because it's forward facing. I'm someone in a different country and I don't understand anything about these topics. So it's because you're talking to an expert, people assume I'm good at small talk. But like even like just watching the like doing the show, this is all small talk. You're good at something. I'm interested in how to get good at something. I'm gonna ask about it. Like, and you can do this naturally too. Like I thought about this a long time ago whenever like I was really social anxiety, like riddled with social anxiety. Like I barely ever asked anybody what they did, what they were interested in, or what they were good at. And if I'd asked any of those three questions, probably could have got a good 30, 45 minutes of conversation out of them without even pressure. Because that's all this is. that's how easy it is. This is.
You're just playing the role of the curious beginner, which is one of the most powerful things you can do, and it's also one of the easiest things you can do. Um, we let's take two extremes. One person who never never asks any questions about the other person. Maybe they only talk about themselves, versus the person who never talks about themselves but talks about the other person. Obviously, we want some kind of mix, but man, if I had to pick one, I would maybe pick the person who uh, never talked about themselves and ask a lot of questions. Now, that's not 100% ideal, but like this has been a couple years ago now. My wife and I went to a wedding, and I sat next to this guy at dinner, and he started asking questions about what kind of work I did, and then he started asking really good, insightful questions, and we had a great like half-hour conversation. And he brought up some cool stuff. I brought up some stuff to ask him, and I feel like I got to know him over that half hour. That's so different than what most people do, which is I'm going to cling to only things that I know, like a life draft, and I I'll be resistant to ask a question for whatever reason, right? Like a couple of good open-ended questions, and boom, you're off to the races. And the gravy, like the really nice stuff, is if your interests happen to overlap with that person's interests. And what I always tell people is that um, you don't have to be interested in everything, but it would really serve you really well to broaden your horizons, like broaden your scope of interests, which I'm sure you're doing just by virtue of being on doing this podcast, right? You get to know a little bit about a lot, where you can say, oh, I interviewed someone who did this, or I heard about this thing that happened. So you're able to connect with a wider variety of people on a wider variety of topics. It doesn't mean you're an expert on every topic, but it means that you know enough to play on the field, which is all you really need, in my opinion.
And we've talked a lot about kind of the concept of overthinking social situations and social interactions and stuff. This is going to lead me to probably the last thing we're going to deconstruct, because I actually think it's really overlooked, and it's so sad that it's really overlooked. But do you think that a lot of people who are socially awkward in social situations is because they're overthinking too much of what they're going to say or do next, and they're not listening to what the other person is actually saying?
Yeah. I think you hit the nail right on the head, and the reason why is because when I first start working with a client, or I'm talking with someone, and we'll talk about what I do, right? So often, people tend to self-evaluate their own performance while they're in the current conversation. Imagine giving yourself marks or a report card on the interaction that you're currently in. Let me tell you, a lot of people do that. And I'll also tell you, they never give themselves good grades. If you're to the point of grading yourself, and you're grading yourself on the interaction that you're currently in, you're going to give yourself a terrible grade every single time. I've never once had someone think about, oh, I'm in this conversation and I'm doing so well. You don't think about that. If you're thinking about your internal state and how am I doing, that self focus, in my opinion, leads to a lot of suffering, in terms of you are shut off to listening. You're shut off to connecting with the other person. You're shut off from all of the things that you need to be doing, which is being flexible, being reactive, obviously listening for what's going on with that person. it shuts you off to all that stuff because you're so focused on me, me, me. How can I say the right next thing? Well, I'm here to tell you, like, if you just took a day and you were like, I'm not really gonna, you could even say to yourself, I'm not gonna think about myself at all today in these conversations. And so instead, you're just listening. You're just asking questions. You're just making a little bit of eye contact. You're not concerned about your report card. I guarantee you're going to have the best interactions you've ever had, probably in that just random Tuesday, right? And so, like to sum it up, internal leads to suffering, external leads to, you might call it like joy or meaning. You're going to have a much better time if you're externally focused.
So, say someone is trying to build their social confidence, or maybe someone's trying to even test their social confidence. What are everyday tests they can do for themselves, or little games they can play socially that might help them evaluate where they are and what they need to work on?
Yeah. So a couple of great places to start. One is realize that for almost every person, I'll tell you this, I've yet to encounter someone who has zero social wins, that can't write something down in a journal that is, I did something social and it went okay. I just haven't met that person. So you can make eye contact, you can smile, you can exit your house. That still counts as a win, right? And so you have to stack a bunch of um, small pebbles in the form of. I think I'm a big fan of just documenting. You have to document it somehow. Document it in a Google Doc, your the Notes app on your phone, whatever works for you. Document it, right? That's step one. Step two is this one thing will change interactions immediately. Um, be more enthusiastic and a little higher energy for the first 60 seconds of a conversation. It doesn't mean that you have to be like a used car salesman jumping off the walls, deals are hot, hot, hot. No, like, no, you don't have to do that. Just be, if your baseline is a 5 out of 10, crank it up to a 7 out of 10. Now, what I'll tell you, and I recommend this in the book, a lot of times you have to first crank it all the way up to a 10 out of 10 to know what's too far. So crank it all the way up and then crank it back to a 7 where you're like, okay, this feels sustainable. You don't have to do it for hours. You're just aiming for the first 60 seconds of conversation. And then when you enter these conversations and you're a little bit more enthusiastic at work or, out with your friends or even with family, what you'll notice, and people do this unconsciously, you're triggering them to return more energy back to you. To to your point you made a few minutes ago about no one wants to be around like a complainer. Now, a complainer is probably more likely to have lower energy as well. It's that Debbie Downer, like, oh, I had to put my dog to sleep. Oh, and it's just like, oh, God, I really don't want to be in this conversation. If you flip that, how can I be more positive? How can I be more enthusiastic? I don't have to be that way for hours on end, just the first 60 seconds. And you'll notice people return that energy to you. Maybe not on a 1-to-1 scale, but they're going to return most of that energy to you because you're letting them know how they can interact with you. And like I'm telling you, you do those two things, you'll be shocked at how uh, well interactions start going for you. And then you'll start to get hungry because you feel like you're in a winning state. And you'll think to yourself, oh, well, man, if that's possible, what else is possible? I really want to get good at this. But it all hinges on showing yourself a lot of uh, evidence of your own competence.
So, would you be an advocate for having almost like social goals?
Yes, but what I mean by that is goals are great. We all need goals. Like I had the goal to write a book. Okay, that's fine. Uh, my system to get there was 100x more important than the goal. My system was I sit down to write at this time every day, and I text a screenshot to my buddy showing him how many words I written that day. And I didn't want to text him a 0 because I would be too embarrassed. And so I made sure that like I had to text him 500 words. And a lot of times I went way beyond that, right? So that was the system that ultimately got me to finish the first draft, which helped everything fall into place. So a social goal, you might have a goal of like, hey, I want to make a new friend. Good. Yes, that's a good goal. But the problem with goals is it keeps you in a constant losing state. You are losing until you get that goal. And then guess what? Okay, I've got a friend. Now what? Now I'm back in a losing state because maybe I want a second friend. The system is, well, okay, if I want a new friend, what do I have to do? What are the upstream behaviors that I have to do to get closer to that goal? Well, it's probably finding places to go. It's probably starting more conversations. And so the system might be, I'm going to research every day. I'll try to look for a place to go, either maybe somewhere I can just go and work for a few hours and be out and about. That's great. Maybe it's an event that I can go to on a weekly basis. Great. I'll start conversations. Well, I'll if I'm going to meet someone who can become a friend because they have the space in their life for it, I'm probably going to need to meet a bunch of people to get to that point to meet that right person so that I'm ready when I meet that right person. Well, I'm going to start a few conversations a day throughout my daily life. And you feel good when you start those conversations because those conversations go decently well. Then you're again tapped into that winning state where you're like, hey, I am winning consistently. And then I get closer to my ultimate goal. And so, long story short, goals are great. You got to have systems to help you get there.
I agree with you, but I think we've dropped more than enough knowledge, and I don't want to spoil this book anymore because confidence max, and I feel like the keyword search is going to blow off in the next few weeks. So we want people to go to there instead. But tell people, where can they find you? What have you got out, and what's coming in the future?
Yeah, yeah. So, if you want to read the first chapter of the book, uh, and have an easy access to order on Amazon, you can go to becomemorecompelling.com/book. And you can look at the table of contents, you can read the first chapter, and you can go to Amazon. As of right now, book is launched, so you can get the Kindle version, you can get the paperback version if you're a paperback fan, which I like both. I've got a lot of these kicking around. Um, the I'm an audiobook person at heart. I love all audiobooks, and that is in approval with Audible right now. And so maybe by the time this goes live, that might be available too. That'll, of course, I'll have a link for that on my website. I can tell you that the narrator did an amazing job, even better than I could have. And I talk for a living, and I'm like, oh, to hear it, and you're like, he's like did everything perfect. And so I'm really excited to share that. And so hopefully that's coming over the next week or so.